instructions for all of us, and we're going to follow suit, inshallah.
Okay. Bismillah-ir-Rahman-ir-Raheem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody.
Alaikum salam. Allah barakatuh.
Inshallah, we're going to keep the same format, 8:15 to 8:45 with our lesson, and we'll save 8:45 to 9 o'clock for question and answer. I will announce this at the end of class again, but just in case somebody has to leave early, our next classes, inshallah, are scheduled for October 11th and October 18th. I will also put this in the chat box as well. Please make sure you're muted, your video is off, except for Dr. Ihab, and we're ready to get started, Bismillah.
Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah fiik. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillah-ir-Rahman-ir-Raheem. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Welcome everyone, and we continue our discussion from last time. And I hope that you have had a chance to watch the videos that are posted online. Last time we talked a little bit about Surah Quraysh, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding Quraysh about his bounty upon them and the agreements that the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had forged with other tribes to the north and to the south. I'm just trying to read the comments that appear on the screen. So the tribes that are to the north and to the south, whether to Asham, what is now Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan, or to the south in Yemen. One important element that happened due to these trade agreements is that trade in Mecca started to prosper. Prior to this trade agreement, Mecca was a pretty much desolate place. No one would really care about settling there other than the people who have been there for centuries. There was no attraction apart from the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the only attraction that brought some of the tribes of the Arabs to visit that house, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their distorted way, which included association with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and idol worshipping and so on. But one of the byproducts of these trade agreements is that it changed completely the nature of the society in Mecca. The Arab tribes out of Mecca that are living in the desert, they did not enjoy this sudden windfall or this sudden prosperity that happened in Mecca, were still relying on raising sheep. They were shepherds. They were nomads, so they used to move around depending on the rain season and depending on whatever vegetation that would grow in this desert. And they were relatively poor. They were not prosperous. And they knew that they had their full reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because again, if the rain doesn't come, then grass is not going to grow, their sheep and their cattle is not going to graze, and they have to move somewhere else. So they were relatively mobile, and they also had a deep connection to nature and a deep, although distorted, connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when we talk about this prosperity that happened in Mecca, it started bringing some new phenomena to the society in Mecca. Basically, some people started emerging as the capitalist layer of the society, the people who had the money or who basically were strong enough, brave enough, and adventurous enough to start on these trade caravans and gradually they started accumulating wealth. So that started creating some differentiation within the society in Mecca. The poor who did not have that capital and who could not travel, who did not have that skill of trade and who stayed as shepherds were poor. Whereas these capitalists started increasing their own wealth and basically controlling the society in Mecca. Some, again, phenomena started appearing in addition to that, the stratification of the society. So we had the rich, which is the layer of the traders. Then we have the completely poor, which is the workers for these traders, and the shepherds, who were seasonal workers. And we had the chieftains, the chiefs of the major tribes, who used to, again, benefit from the different tribes coming to Mecca for Hajj and for the different trade markets that used to occur in Mecca around the time of Hajj. with this phenomenon of new riches and new wealth appearing in Mecca, the social ills of this wealth started appearing as well. So the rich people started caring about themselves, not caring about any other people, and started making use of these poor people. If they needed money, they would lend them money, and they invented or they started this practice of usury or riba. So some people prospered also from this practice of lending people money with interest. Their money was safe and their money was just working for them without them doing any effort. To the extent that some of these Arab merchants became extremely wealthy. One of them is said that he wouldn't wear the same garment twice. And that was Abdullah ibn Jud'an, one of the wealthiest people in Mecca. Another one, Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, whenever he wore a garment, a sign of wealth would be that the garment would be long enough and it would have a tail that would drag behind him in the dust. And he would hire slaves to carry the tails of his garment. This is a sign of wealth. Not everyone could afford that. And they started forgetting about their moral and ethical role toward the people and the disenfranchised in the society. The Arab morals that used to exist before these trade agreements, courage, support for the poor and the needy, solidarity, a social network of welfare, all of these things started to erode because of this new wealth and these new appearances that came with that wealth. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was somewhere in between. He was not one of the wealthy layer, but he worked for them. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ, when he started learning that trade with his uncle Abu Talib, he ﷺ started working as a broker for wealthy people to carry their trade to Asham and to Al-Yemen and to trade for them. Because of his honesty and because of his trustworthiness, he used to bring much more profit than most of the other traders. And that's how he ﷺ was introduced to a Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, as we're going to mention later, inshallah. So the Prophet ﷺ, we can say he was an emerging middle class person. He was not an upper class person from a perspective of wealth, and he was not extremely poor either, but he was somewhere in between. So he ﷺ could watch both layers, the one above him and the one below him, and he saw the difference between these two layers, which is started to increase and not decrease. And he ﷺ did not like that. So from time to time, he would start staying away from all of these trade agreements and all of these negotiations related to trade, because the talk of Quraysh and the major tribes of Quraysh or branches of Quraysh around the Kaaba in Dar al-Nadwa, which was their gathering place, was only related to trade. How much are we going to buy? How much are we going to sell? Which markets are we going to attack? How can we make use of these poor people? What kind of goods are going to be needed for trade, and so on and so forth. And the Prophet ﷺ saw that this is not the purpose of the haram. This is not living up to the sanctity of the haram and the trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on the shoulders of Quraysh to take care of that haram. And he ﷺ recognized that it's actually his grandfather who introduced this idea, or his great-grandfather, not direct grandfather, but great-grandfather, who introduced this idea of trade and trade agreements. And instead of Quraysh seeing that as an opportunity for solidarity, for the whole community to grow together, it started dividing the community into different layers. And that created some sort of envy and some sort of hatred and dissolution of the fabric of the community together. That's why when we look at the beginning of the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ, actually even before the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ, as we know, he used to go to the mountains and seek solitude, to think about worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, clearing his mind from this talk about money, money, money all day. So he used to go in solitude to Ghar Hira for a few days every year and just worship in solitude, thinking about the Creator, thinking about the world around him, and trying to seek that power that created all of this universe. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When we look at the beginning of the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the early days in Mecca, we find that it's talking a lot. We mentioned last time that it was bringing the attention of Quraysh to the natural phenomena around them, al-Shams, al-Qamar, al-najm, al-duha, and so on, which are basically things that they see on a daily basis. The rise of the sun and the setting of the sun, the appearance of the moon grows in size and then shrinks in size, the different times of the day. All of these are things that they can see around them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing their thoughts to looking at the mountains, looking at the camels, looking at their own selves, so that they would recognize the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and start again thinking about something other than money. And the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in addition to bringing Quraysh's attention to these things, also talked about that social ill that has affected Quraysh, which is the dissolution of that fabric of the society. So we find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the beginning, for example, revealing to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, among the surah that were revealed relatively early, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ? Have you seen the one who is denying faith? Now, someone would think that the following ayah is talking about someone who's worshipping idols, or someone who's equating these idols with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or someone who's denying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the one who is denying faith as فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. So this was something totally new for Quraysh. Now, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known for his integrity, was completely respected within the whole of Quraysh, and they knew his honesty and his trustworthiness and so on and so forth. And before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even as we mentioned, there was Qas ibn Sa'ida, one of the Hanifiyin, the people who used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to the religion of Sayyidina Ibrahim. There was Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, another one of these Hunafa or Hanifiyin who used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only and reject all the idols and their worship. And there was Waraq ibn Nawfal, who was also someone who worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, did not participate in the worship of these idols. And these people were well known in Mecca. Their faith and the practice of their faith was well known in Mecca. And Quraysh did not have any problem with that. Quraysh never attacked them, never criticized them, never shunned them or exiled them or anything like that. They were living in Mecca, they were living around Al-Haram, they were frequenting Al-Haram and declaring what they believe. So for example, Qas ibn Sa'ida, especially during the big occasions that used to happen in Mecca, he used to chant some poetry about the uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be worshipped without any partners. And these idols do not help or do not cause any harm. Quraysh knew about that, but again, no one cared about attacking him. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in addition to this fact, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam came up with the practical application of that faith. The faith that is uniting all the people, the faith that's equating or equalizing among all the people, the faith that's trying to give solidarity within the community, for the rich to take care of the poor, and for the strong to take care of the weak, and so on. This is something that Quraysh unfortunately has forgotten. These are the old values of the Arab society that Quraysh has forgotten. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reviving this new call. Not only that, but the most dangerous part to them was, like Umayyah ibn Khalaf, for example, told the Prophet ﷺ when he approached him about Islam, are you going to make me and my slave Bilal equal? Are we going to be equal under the consideration of your God and your faith? How come? I am the master and he is the slave. He works for me. I can do whatever I want to him. I can sell him. I can kill him. I can do whatever I want. How can he be equal to me? How can we be mentioned in the same sentence? How can we be gathered in the same meeting? That shouldn't work. Quraysh, again, knowing this stratification of the society, that was one reason for their rejection. So Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, who was one of the leaders of Bani Makhzum, one of the prominent branches of Quraysh, and it was actually one of the competitors to Bani Hashim in leadership and in prestige and so on. as would be described later on by another member of that tribe, Abu Jahl, la'nahullah, who rejected the Prophet ﷺ just for the sake that his tribe and the tribe or his clan and the clan of the Prophet ﷺ were equal in everything, like two horses in a race or two camels in a race, according to his words. Until they were neck to neck, he says that they fed, we fed. They gave rides, we gave rides. They gave water, we gave water. They did this, we did that. So we were completely equal. Until the two camels were neck to neck, now they're claiming we have a prophet from our tribe. How can we achieve that? So he doesn't want Quraysh, he doesn't want Bani Hashim to be above him. Therefore, he rejected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Same thing for Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, same thing for Umayyah ibn Khalaf, same thing for all of these older leaders of Quraysh who, again, have prospered and made large fortunes out of this trade. They wanted to monopolize this trade and not to share it with anyone else. They wanted to use people as their labor and their slaves, but they did not want to share that wealth with any other people. So when the Prophet ﷺ comes with this equality, that's something that they're going to fight. When the Prophet ﷺ one day was sitting with, it happened actually more than once. It happened once, at least once in Mecca, and it happened at least once in Medina, even after the Prophet ﷺ migrated. He would be sitting with some of his companions, the poor ones, and the leaders of tyranny of Quraysh and the leaders of other tribes in Medina later on would come to the Prophet ﷺ and would say, we cannot be seen sitting with these poor people. So if you want to talk to us, you have to set some time aside for us where these poor people are not going to be invited. That's our condition to talk to you or to listen to you. And the Prophet ﷺ one day was approached by some of these leaders of Quraysh. That was relatively early in the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ, around the 4th year of the Ba'tha, after he became a prophet, 4 years after he became a prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was approached by some of the leaders of Quraysh. Utbah ibn Rabi'a, Shayba ibn Rabi'a, Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, all the big wigs, all the big names. They told the Prophet ﷺ, sit with us and try to convince us of what you're coming with. We're going to listen to you. And he ﷺ thought about it and he said, well, this is a great opportunity because, again, these are the leaders of Quraysh. If they embrace Islam, a lot of people are going to come Islam just by peer pressure or seeing that these role models that they are worshipping basically have become Muslims, so they're going to come to Islam as well. So the Prophet ﷺ thought this is going to be a great opportunity. And while he ﷺ was talking to them, came a poor Muslim who wanted to learn about Islam. Now these are people who put condition upon talking to the Prophet ﷺ, and on the other hand, there's another poor Muslim who came voluntarily to ask the Prophet ﷺ for guidance and for knowledge. And that was a blind man. He could not see that these leaders of Quraysh were with the Prophet ﷺ. If he could see, he would have thought, well, this might not be the right time. Let the Prophet ﷺ convince them. But he could not see. So he approached the Prophet ﷺ asking for guidance and asking for knowledge. He told him, teach me from what you have been taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, again, caring about bringing all of Quraysh to Islam, thought that this is probably not the best time. I can talk to this man later on. So the face of the Prophet ﷺ changed. And he frowned. He thought, well, don't you see that I'm talking to these people? Of course, the man couldn't see because he was blind. And that was Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu, the great companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam frowned, it was just the appearance of the face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that changed a little bit. And the man could not see it, so he was not offended because he would not see the face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing to the attention of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the priorities. What are the priorities? The ones who seek knowledge for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are the ones who take the highest priority, and these are the ones to whom you should dedicate all of your time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the ayat that we read until today. the surah in the Quran, Surah Abasa. عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى وما يدريك لعله يزكى أو يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى. We mentioned last time about the difference between وما يدريك and وما أدراك. وما أدراك comes with the answer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereas وما يدريك, the answer is not given. It's an open-ended question. So it's sort of a rhetorical question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how would you know who is going to embrace Islam and who is not going to embrace Islam? Who's going to end up being a Muslim and who is going to keep rejecting that faith? It's not a matter of wealth. It's not a matter of social status. Whoever comes to you seeking the knowledge, that's the one that you should direct your attention to. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, أَمَّا مَنِ اسْتَغْنَى فَأَنْتَ لَهُ تَصَدَّى وَمَا عَلَيْكَ أَلَّا يَزَّكَّى. The one who feels that they do not need this faith. They are in no need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. استغنى فأنت له تصدى. You are dedicating your time to talk to them. وما عليك ألا يزكى. It's not your responsibility. You're not going to be held accountable whether they come to the faith or not. What you are responsible for is just delivering the message. But the results of that message are only in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, do not waste your time. Do not waste your brain cells about who is going to become Muslim, who is not going to become Muslim. That is not your role. Your role is to pave the way. Your role is to present Islam in the best possible way. And then the guidance comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws the comparison. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى وَهُوَ يَخْشَى فَأَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَّى. And the one who came from a far distance, although he is blind, and he is fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wants to learn from the knowledge that you're going to give to him. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى وَهُوَ يَخْشَى فَأَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَّى. You are being distracted from him. You're not giving him the time. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a very strong word. كَلَّا. No, that should not happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about who to approach about Islam, how to approach them about Islam, and not to waste his time with people who feel that they're going to add value to Islam. No one adds value to Islam. Islam adds value to everyone. So the one who thinks that by becoming a Muslim, I'm adding something to Islam, that person is totally useless and worthless. But the one who comes to Islam knowing that Islam is going to add to my life, Islam is going to change my life, and that's why I'm going to seek Islam, this is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to dedicate his time to. We find similar ayat also coming in another surah that was revealed a little bit later also in Mecca, which is Surah Al-Kahf that we always read on every Friday, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again is reminding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam learned his lesson immediately. And later on, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would see Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would embrace him and hug him and tell him, أهلا بمن عاتبني فيه ربي. Welcome with the one upon whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded me on how to treat. And later on, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he would go on an expedition, sometimes he would appoint Abdullah ibn Maktoum, the blind man, as the ruler of Medina, to take charge of Medina in the absence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he went on an expedition. Later on, inshallah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Maktoum and two major events in his life, but inshallah at another point in time, bi'idhnillah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Surah Al-Kahf, واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا. The mere translation of the meaning of the ayat is, keep yourself patient and stay as long as it takes with the people who are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking, supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night, in the morning and in the evening. وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. For what purpose? يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. They are doing that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the sake of any worldly gains. وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And let your sight not be distracted towards those who seek worldly gains. They would distract you from sitting with these people. These are better in the consideration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than those wealthy, arrogant people. So this was a clear message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We find the same meaning stressed over and over again in many of the ayat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is criticizing all of these social ills that happened to the Arabian society, particularly in Mecca. As I mentioned, some of the other nomad tribes maintained and kept their honor and their chivalry and their generosity and their care for the poor and so on. But in the urban settlements like Mecca, like At-Ta'if, like Yathrib, like the larger settlements, people have forgotten about these values, distracted by the wealth that was bestowed upon them. And instead of attributing this wealth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who reminds them, as we mentioned in Surah Quraysh, الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ, instead of doing that and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who fed them from hunger and secured them from fear, instead of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now they are associating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worshipping these idols, which is not a fair trade or a fair deal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also reveals to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran, in these years in Mecca, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam the stories about the previous prophets. And interestingly enough, one particular prophet, Sayyidina Shu'aib ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, faced something very similar to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Sayyidina Shu'aib ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam came with Islam to his people, and he was known before declaring his da'wah as a pious person, as a person who was very decent, who was very devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who would pray. They would see him praying and he did not object to that or reject that. But once Sayyidina Shu'aib, Jazakallah Khairan, once Sayyidina Shu'aib radiallahu ala nabiyina alayhi salatu wasalam starts connecting this faith with life practices, which is basically what faith is about, the life practices should be a reflection of that faith, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions always in the Quran, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, those who have declared that they are faithful and substantiated that or proven it through the good deeds that they are doing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the story of Sayyidina Shu'aib ala nabiyina alayhi salatu wasalam in Surah Hud, where his people rebelled against him in the end when he started criticizing their buying and selling practices. They were unfair in their buying and selling. They would give people less than what they're entitled to, and they would get from them more than what they deserve, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also criticized in Surah Al-Mutaffifin, which is talking about this whole concept. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that this is the rejection of faith. This practice is a rejection of faith because it's completely against equality and justice and fairness. So these people rebelled against Sayyidina Shu'aib ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, and they asked him, قالوا يا شعيب أصلاتك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء? Is your prayer compelling you to command us to abandon what our ancestors have been worshipping, these idols, or to do whatever we want to do with our wealth? What does faith have to do with trade? They saw a disconnect between these two. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing all of these things together because the Muslim cannot or should not lead a double life. The life of a Muslim is completely consistent. So whatever they have on the outside is what they have on the inside. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands justice and fairness in all aspects of life. And among these aspects of life is your daily business, your daily trade. You cannot claim that you are a believer and faithful and fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your actions speak.
Yes, and we can hear you, alhamdulillah.
Okay, inshallah, jazakumullah khair. So basically, we're going to pause here, inshallah, and we're going to continue next time. But this was the main theme of our discussion today, how to connect our faith with our actions, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought this to the attention of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to his followers from day one, that you cannot separate Islam and the beliefs and the rituals and the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from your daily practice. They have to go hand in hand. So with that, inshallah, I'm going to conclude. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And inshallah, the floor is open for any questions that anyone might have, inshallah. Jazakallah.